I never really thought about the big statue, the four-toed statue thing.
Oh, I've thought a lot about the statue.
Okay, so do you know what that statue is of? I
No.
don't remember the
Oh
name.
yeah, the big alligator head thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is, I forgot what her name is, but
Yeah.
that is the goddess of fertility
Yeah.
as a shrine to this
How
fertility thing.
I want to do a Lost podcast, but how could we do it and make it somehow unique than the other ones?
You don't do it episode to episode.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard not to in a way because you kind of have to. You almost, my idea would be almost like you break it down like Lost chronological and start at the beginning and
I was going to say that. I was going
work
to
your way through the show in an order to make it make sense.
I was going to suggest that. So, you landed right on my idea. So, what if we do Lost chronologically? We watch Lost in chronological order, and we do a historical, like a chronological historical take on Lost. We start at the very beginning. So the things that happened, the people that were on the island way before the plane crash, before the Dharma Initiative, that'll be what we talk about first, like the first
Right.
people to show up
We
at the
talk.
island.
I just love talking. I keep asking people, have you watched Lost tonight? Yeah, or I kind of, and I'm like, God, I can't talk to you. I need to talk to somebody else.
No, I'm 100% down. We've been talking about it for a while. I was thinking we do like a Lost episode podcast, but the thing is it's one, it would take away from reading time. I basically don't watch any TV shows now. I don't know about.
I don't really watch anything either.
I constantly have audio going. Is like I'm one of these people that I can't be in a silent room and do anything. And so I have YouTube videos up. But like you, I'm like watching videos about some topic. I'm not actually watching television. And any time that I used to spend watching TV, I now spend reading, and which is a good thing. I'm glad I'm reading more. But I can't imagine sitting down and doing a podcast where it's like, okay, every week I got to watch 3 episodes of Lost, and then we get together and discuss it. But if we look at something like Lost chronologically, where it's still broken up into episodes, but just I think that's more interesting to try to take it that way and digest it, and then also having special topic episodes. I've done it once. I've watched all chronologically Lost one time.
I mean, I love that concept. So
yeah, it's crazy. All right, we'll call it Lost backwards and forwards.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, this episode, we are going to be not talking about Lost. That was spontaneous. David and I, if David and I are together long enough, we'll talk about Lost.
We're going to talk about Lost. Yeah.
It's an inevitability. Every get together, every job we've ever had together, every D&D session. Although lately we've broken off in the conversations about the Dark Tower too, because you got me on that. But this episode, we've finished reading the Dark Tower, and we're going to be talking about Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio. I don't know. It always makes me think of Ralph. What's the Karate
Ralph
Kid?
Macchio.
Yeah, it makes me think of Ralph Macchio. And we're also going to talk about Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast news before we get into the book review. So we got a pretty full episode. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get on a soapbox at some point. But before we do, how is your holiday madness? How has your holiday madness been? You got crazy family stuff going on for the holidays, or is it pretty chill in your neck of the woods?
No, it's been fairly chill. Like we're just gearing up. I finally did a little bit of shopping, but
oh yeah,
we're gonna kind of hang out here for most of it. I think Cooper and I are gonna go to the beach for 2 days.
Oh, that's cool.
See my parents, but other than that, yeah, we'll be here.
That's cool.
Watching Lost and reading books.
I've got so my dad and my sisters all live in Augusta. Well, actually, the next youngest, I'm the oldest. Next youngest is my sister. She actually moved to Washington D.C. So I don't know when I'll see her for Christmas, but even the family in Augusta, it was always like I won't see them till after Christmas. So I have this buffer period where I buy Christmas gifts for my mom who lives here, and then my wife's family who lives here. But then we can kind of, we have like a break where we can wait till that first paycheck after Christmas before we buy my sisters and my dad and my stepmom because because we won't see them until after Christmas. So I always have that buffer where I get to split it in two. But man, my wife's family, as they have more and more kids, it's stressful enough. Like it's
right.
Yeah, Christmas is wild. And we have a big gift this year too. My son is going to lose his mind Christmas morning.
Yeah.
Because we got an air hockey table, I got a Black Friday. It was on sale Black Friday. We got like a full size, like arcade style air hockey table.
Right. Yeah, those are so much fun.
I have no idea where we're gonna put it. I was
right.
I told Beck I'm gonna make a big wood thing to go on top of it, so we could just use it as a
table.
And then take the wood cover off whenever we want to use the air hockey table.
You have to put an addition onto your house, make a game room.
I think it probably at some point it'll end up in the garage. I think I want to put like a split unit in the garage so that we can climate control the garage. I haven't done the first step in looking into how to do that, but that would be the dream if that
sounds fun.
However plausible that is. But yeah, for the most part, today was not my last day of work, but there's nobody really, like everybody's on vacation now. So hopefully all the dust is settled and no one's who's opening tickets when nobody's there. It should settle down now.
Yeah. That's watching lots of YouTube videos at work this week.
So it's no easy way to go into this news story, but some negative news, and the Hasbro Wizards of the Coast world. Hasbro laid off 1,100 employees, including WOTC employees. There was some speculation in the beginning that because Wizards of the Coast is like one of their only profitable brands within the company, that they probably weren't laying people off there, but we've recently found out, that even them, which, man, I just don't know. I don't know. I've got an article here. I can start reading some of the article just to kind of start the conversation, but
yeah, well, I don't know if it was one of those that I was reading, but I was reading one of the articles that was talking about the Wizards of the Coast and the D&D side.
Yeah,
and they were saying like some of the jobs that were lost were like creative development jobs, like people that are in charge of lead designs and stuff like that. It's like that's the people that are
some of the
actually
names,
designing the stuff that makes you money. Like
some of
make much sense.
It makes no sense. Some of the people laid off from the Dungeons and Dragons side of things were like designers that have been with the company for like 10, 11 years, and they've designed like books that we've purchased. There's some on my wall behind me, like lead adventure pack and game, like lead designers, like big people in the design department. And it's just, I don't understand. I don't, that's basically my takeaway from this whole situation is I just don't understand like how this is a good decision. Like where in their quote unquote trimming the fat, like at what point do they say, well, if we trim this fat, we're possibly ruining, our profits for future years and for future products. Like we're actively making the company worse so that we can make some statement about this year end. And it's beyond, it's just, I don't understand this like inhuman vampire corporate like speak. Like it makes zero sense to me. So
some of the thing, like, so they had released 800 people at the beginning of the year.
Prior
to this
in January,
and then it said that that was supposed to save them $300 million annually by 2025, and that their new focus was focus on fewer, larger brands, digital development, and invest hard on direct-to-consumer and licensed deals.
Yeah,
I mean that to me. And then he says he also championed Wizards of the Coast Gaming as their continued breadwinner.
Yeah.
And then like literally then you get rid of those people that you're trumpeting their success. Like
Yeah. So first off, let's try to discuss, why do you think Hasbro is doing poorly? They are doing really poorly. So
Yes.
their stock is nosedived 21% over the past year. And I even saw an article where like other companies' stocks are doing well. Theirs are still like doing poorly in certain areas. I don't understand stock. I don't know. But like it seems like they're doing terribly, right? Why do you think
Right.
that? Why do you think that is? Granted, not WOTC. WOTC is the shining star of Hasbro, but Hasbro, the toy manufacturer, the board game manufacturer, owner of WOTC, Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering, and Dungeons and Dragons. Why do you think they're doing poorly? Do you have any? I have a theory, but I'm giving you a chance to go first.
I'd like to see when the drastic fall really started, because to be honest with you, I feel like the whole license thing, open license, hurt them more than they would probably care to admit.
I think you're right about that, but I will say that I don't know whenever the fall started, but I know that at that time, I know that, because the only reason why I know about this is because at that time I was involved in that drama, and at that time people were saying WotC's doing terrible, or not WotC, Hasbro's doing terrible. WotC is their only shining star. Like that was the narrative even back then. So I think they've been doing poorly. I think since around the time of the pandemic. I know that Hasbro, whenever they released their letter for why they're doing this, they put a lot of blame on the downturn after the pandemic and that they didn't recover, as fast as other companies. But while that's probably true, my suspicion is it was probably going on before that.
Oh, definitely. And when you think of like somebody who doesn't know or play D&D or anything like that, when you think Hasbro, you're thinking like toys, and I know they were involved in some cartoons, back in the day too.
Yeah.
And the one company that's mentioned here is Mattel, and they got a big push with the Barbie movie. Yeah. But like when you think kids' toys, Mattel is still like that company that you think of, and Hasbro, like I don't really think of them anymore when I think of Hasbro toys. I think of the 70s and 80s, and like it's almost like a company that doesn't exist anymore. And if you didn't play D&D or something, you wouldn't even realize Hasbro was around. Like, yeah. No. Like if you go to like back when Toys R Us was still around, and I'm sure that didn't help either with Toys R Us closing.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But like even going into Toys R Us, I don't ever remember seeing like a Hasbro toy section. It was, you'd see your Mattel and all these other things, but you never saw that. And like, I don't know, maybe it's just their particular things that they own aren't popular right now with people like it used to be. Like,
yeah, I mean that's definitely true. I think that what it reminds me of is the comic book industry, because right now the comic book industry is going through a similar situation where it's like they're only doing well whenever they basically appeal to the whales, whenever they put out like 100 variant and covers, and like whenever they appeal to the collectors, the people that they know are going to buy no matter what, and they just try to get as much money out of those people as they can. But there was a time where the comic book industry, it was made and came from kids reading comics, and Hasbro used to sell toys to kids. Now they sell toys to adults, and I just think that is I think that really, this company is kind of a victim to that change. I mean, I can tell you my kid has, I don't even know if he's got Hasbro toys, but he has hardly any action figures. Like action figures that I played with when I was a kid, G.I. Joe. My kid has Ninja Turtles. I had Ninja Turtles as a kid. Star Wars action figures. My kid does not care about a single Star Wars action figure. It is just not, and I give him comics. I wish he liked comics. He does not want to, it does not, how does a comic book compete with a 6-year-old's attention? How does it compete with an iPad? You know what I mean? Like there's no comparison.
There isn't.
And he watches so much kids YouTube that like whenever he plays with toys, he doesn't play with action figures. He plays with like stuffed animals or he does have some action figures that are like the little, like not pop vinyls, but they're like little kid like action figures. And maybe this will change as he gets older. Legos, he loves some Legos. Legos all day long, and I think kids still love Legos. But I just don't think kids are going out and buying like action figures and toys like that anymore. And a company like Hasbro, they're trying to get as much money as they can from the whales, from the grown collectors that are our age, that it's going to go to the store and they're going to buy every member of the Avengers because they want to have that complete, set. And then they're watching YouTube and waiting on the next announcement of the next Hasbro toy package to come out. And that industry has just shifted that way. And I think that there's no amount of, there's no amount of, they just can't make that money back. Like, I just don't think the days of kids buying things off the I mean, if that were true, then Toys R Us would still be around. Like it's just, the toy industry is just not the same as it was in Hasbro's heyday, and it never will be again. And so while I think they are trying to shift they're trying to shift their business model to something more modern. I just don't think that this particular move was a very good one.
So like I was looking at the Hasbro like website.
Yeah.
And they list like, I guess it's brands that they own that you can go and shop under their brands. So like, obviously Dungeons and Dragons, but like they've got like Beyblade, like,
yeah, that's right.
That's very like unique. Like it's not a big popular thing, but like Fortnite maybe.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Which again, G.I. Joe's not what it used to be for kids. Like everyone had G.I. Joe when we were kids. Like and now it's not.
We actually did get my kid something G.I. Joe recently for Christmas. And we've already given it to him. He has the flu right now. So we said he could open one of his Christmas gifts early, and it was that one. And he wanted it because he saw it in the store and he bought it. And I think he's played with it once since he opened it. He's not even no longer interested in it. And and when we go to the store, he's not going to want another one. Like it's not like you know what kids want? These stupid, and maybe this is what Hasbro needs to get into. Maybe they're already doing this. I don't know. But my son will buy any of those like dumb little eggs that you don't know what's inside of it. And you buy it and open it and there's stuff inside of it. He loves those things. Like anything. And you know why? It's because he watches other kids open them on YouTube. And that's why he wants those things, the little Minecraft boxes that you don't know what's inside the box.
So they also own Star Wars, which I don't know. But so again, what you were talking about earlier so like if you go to Target now and you go to the toy section and you go to the Star Wars section, they have plenty of action figures. Yep. But if you know the Star Wars thing, like they're all the Black Series. Like that are not you buy to open and play with. Right. Exactly. Those are all collector. Like the Black Series are like $20 to $50 figures somewhere in that, depending on size and different things like that. So like, whereas when I was a kid in Star Wars, like you bought everything and ripped the packaging open and you were making like, you know, all these grand battles with all these dudes and like, so like, I mean like, and they got Transformers, which Transformers isn't big like it used to be. Like
all this stuff is for adults. Is for adults. They're selling.
The one thing that they have is Nerf.
Oh, okay. Now my son does play with Nerf. He does play with Nerf.
Yeah, that's probably their money maker. Nerf and Monopoly. But I mean, again, like people don't play Monopoly like they used to. Like
no. The only people there's like Monopoly collectors out there. They're just like And even that is like, that was a bigger thing 10 years ago than it is now. I haven't heard anybody talk about the new Monopoly set. I remember that was a big thing when I first started learning about selling things on eBay. That was the big thing, is like you go to the next town over, Walmart, and you buy all their Monopolies, and then you sell them on eBay for like $20 more because you know, they would sell. People would buy them because their town is out of it at their Walmart. Yeah, that's I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like that's literally like their cornerstone for Hasbro
Yeah,
is
they're
Nerf probably.
so anyway, my point to all this is I don't know. I wish WOTC were a different company. I wish WOTC were not owned by Hasbro because Hasbro is sinking. It's going under. The only thing they have is WOTC and maybe Nerf. And like, it's just, even the other stuff we talked about, the toy collectibles that toy collectors are out buying, that stuff's just not popular enough, I think, to sustain this business.
No.
And somebody needs to buy WOTC. WOTC needs to be separated from Hasbro. There was I saw an article where there was some talk about this in the past, I think last year, and Hasbro, for obvious reasons, was like completely against the idea. They like shut the whole thing down. Like, no way, we're never getting rid of WOTC. Is there any sort of like corporate mechanism where like they could enough shareholders that are in support of WOTC but not the rest of Hasbro could strip it away somehow and make it its own company? Because that would be successful. That there's a great video by, it's the same, I'll link it in the show notes, but I don't know the name to call it out on the show. But there's a great video that's comparing Warhammer's 2023 to Hasbro's 2023 or even WOTC's 2023. And it is just like a bizarro world comparison, like just night and day. And I'm not a Warhammer fan. The only Warhammer I've ever bought, I'd never painted and I never did anything with. But the just Warhammer, their fans seem to appreciate them. They make decisions that seems like they have a good understanding of, how to make money while offering their fans something that they'll love. Like, it's just the comparison between these two like companies. D&D, one person buys the book and then 5 people sit at a table and play the game. Like, how is that sustainable? Like, how is it's a, I don't know. They have to find creative ways to open the market up to more people to buy their products. If they sold, card games have like solo versions of their game now. So you can buy a card game that you can play competitively, or you can purchase some special rules or download special rules online where you can play it solo. What if Wizards of the Coast branched out into solo RPGs? Solo RPGs are a thing that exists. They firing 1,100 people doesn't seem like the right way to make this company profitable.
No.
Especially of the people that it seems like they fired. It seems like the worst people. Meanwhile, Chris Cox received $9.4 million in total compensation last year, and that's a salary of $1.5 million. So he made $1.5 million just for working there, and then the additional $8 million is because I guess the company did so well. I mean, damn, how much money would it have made if they had been profitable, if they had been if they had better stock returns? Like, would he have made $20 million? Like, is this
exactly?
It's insane to me. It's insane to me to think that this dude can get $9.4 million while firing 1,100 people, while firing 2,000 people at a company that has 6,000 employees. Like that is insane. And there's a quote going around from Nintendo, because this happened once with Nintendo, where they were trying to make up some losses to improve their shareholder respect, representation, or whatever. And they didn't take any bonuses, and they made cuts to their salaries to avoid letting people go. And I know the company I work for did a similar thing during COVID. Not exactly, but they did, they made corporate cuts to pays and to benefit packages and stuff like that, so that they wouldn't have to let people go. And it's just it just seems completely tone deaf that in the same year that the D&D fan base was so up in arms over the OGL, and the same year they laid off 800 people earlier in the year.
Earlier, yes.
That they didn't take any cuts he didn't, he don't worry. He got his while he let 1,100 people go before Christmas. I mean, it's insane. It's insane to me. I just, I literally don't understand it. And while I don't want D&D to go under, because I think it's important for tabletop role-playing gaming. I mean, if you don't have D&D, what do you have?
Right.
There's a ton of games out there, but they're all floating on the idea that everybody's introduced by D&D. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like, one of the corporate speak things saw too was, that the labor cutting was like the last desperate, measure. And everyone knows, like, if you've worked in retail whatsoever, labor is the easiest thing to control as far as expenses. And so if you need to make your bottom line look better, the easiest way to do that is to cut costs and to cut labor. And that is also disingenuous because, like, I guarantee you they were like, in a meeting, hey, the bottom line is not looking good. Guys, what do we do? I don't know. We're not making any more money, so we got to cut money. And, hey, let's just cut some more people. What can we cut?
Yeah.
And to make it sound like they did everything in their power and that was like the last ditch effort is just, that's ridiculous because anybody that knows anything knows that that's not true.
It makes me not want to play Dungeons and Dragons anymore. But then on the other hand, that seems like it's punishing the wrong people because if I have an opinion section of the show notes here, and this is obviously my opinion, but I think that Hasbro or Chris Cox or whoever, I think they're trying to get purchased. I think they want Hasbro to get purchased by someone. I think they want to get paid out of this system.
Yes,
because
it makes no sense for because that's what happens with companies. They start doing poorly, and then somebody sweeps in and buys a majority of their stock, and next thing you know, they're taking over. And I can't imagine with that lineup, with D&D as popular as it is, and again, some of those other things that we named like Nerf and Monopoly and Play-Doh. Apparently, they own Play-Doh.
My kid does. My kid does have Play-Doh, actually.
Exactly. So, there's they've got to do something, and I can't imagine another investor out there saying, wow, we feel like we can do something with this. To me, it sounds like they're being mismanaged.
They're being so mismanaged,
and they need someone to come in that could do it. Even if they sold off, like you said, they could sell off Wizards of the Coast, or they could sell off Nerf for a crap ton of money. If they needed money that bad,
just license thing like Dungeons and Dragons licensing to Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know how much money that brought in, but it was like the most popular game and the most well-received and well-loved game of the year of a very long time. I've seen a lot of people talk about how great it was, that it was a game that wasn't trying to constantly sell you loot boxes, that it was just a good game. And that's all it was. You bought it once and you had this good game for life. And Hasbro probably didn't invest anything in that. It was made by completely different people. They had nothing to do with it other than licensing D&D to this other company to make this game. Which, by the way, they just made a Warhammer game. They don't need Hasbro. They wanted Dungeons and Dragons. And it's just, it's insane. It's just, it is mismanaged is 100% the right word.
And with Baldur's Gate, not only is it a great game and won Game of the Year this year, and not only did it win Game of the Year, but it won Game of the Year against some big games that came out this year.
Yeah.
Like this whole last few months have been huge for the gaming world. And so that should tell Hasbro all they need to know about the profitability of D&D. And it just seems like you would cut from other places and then reinvest that money into your Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, I misspoke. Owlcat Games is making the Warcraft game. which also they make great Pathfinder games. But whatever. Sorry.
Right. But yeah, I mean, like, that's what, like, I mean, sorry, Transformers isn't cutting it. Let's cut from their team, take that money, put it into Wizards of the Coast, and hire more people instead of firing them.
Yeah.
And, do something because, I mean, literally that's just sitting there, and it is profitable for them, but it could be, I guarantee it could be so much more profitable.
Here's what my guess is. I'm just straight off of just my speculation. Star Wars is probably a very expensive licensing to have.
Oh, I'm sure.
The Transformers, G.I. Joe, all the other stuff you mentioned that they have licensing for, they probably spent so much money on that they don't want to cut anybody in those departments because of their, the lost cost fallacy. They feel like, oh, we paid so much for that.
Yeah.
We want to keep people on those products, and we need to put more of a focus. That's eventually going to work out one day because we invested so much in it. Right. Whereas D&D is probably like whatever cost they had into buying Wizards of the Coast or whatever, that's all been done. And like, now Wizards of the Coast is their breadwinner, but they don't really have this sunk cost fallacy tied into it. And so maybe that's why they thought that was a good, but it's terrible right. Anyway. It's terrible anyway, because I don't even know even if all those 1,100 people had been if they were all Play-Doh people, which that would be absurd. But like, it's so terrible anyway to just let all these people go without warning, like this close to Christmas, while making so much money in bonuses and total compensation. And I know that like Chris Cox is one dude, and he's the face of this whole thing. It's not just him. There's other corporate greedy fat cats in this company too, as there is, I'm sure, with every company. But it's disgusting. And I've never seen a company like Blizzard, WOTC. Like, I've never seen a company that went from being a like private, passionate company to being a publicly traded company, and it turned out well for the initial IP. Like, every single time a company turns into these stock adjusting, signaling to their shareholders year over year profits, every single time they ruin the product. Every single time. There's zero success stories. If you are a fan of something, the moment it becomes publicly traded, go to the next thing. We should have all switched to Pathfinder. Like like go to the next thing. I've felt gross playing Dungeons and Dragons ever since the OGL thing. And everybody was so like ready to switch to other games. And I 100% was on board with that. And then now nobody's talking about it and everybody's playing D&D again. I just feel like I don't want to anymore. Like this company has ruined it for me. I don't want anything to do with it anymore. Magic is ruined for me. I played Magic since 1994. I've played Magic since 1994. And recently with look, I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. I actually thought Lord of the Rings was a good fit for Magic the Gathering. That seemed like they did that very respectfully. Doctor Who, I'm a Doctor Who fan. I don't want it in Magic the Gathering. And it's an obvious cash grab. You know what I mean? Like all the secret layers. I bought a secret layer. It used to be on camera. It's in my closet now. I've bought secret layers whenever it first started, and it was like this small thing that was like, just sort of this neat. But now there's a secret layer like every 2 months or something. And it's always it's always some IP that they're obviously just trying to like milk as much cash out of people as they can. Like, this is the equivalent of the loot boxes in your MMOs. Like the corporate loot box is milking the whales for all they can. That is the, and you say, well, they know it's ruining the game. They know that the people that have been playing the game forever don't like this stuff. Why do they do it? Well, they do it because it makes $1 billion. Like, the reason why there's a cash shop in World of Warcraft is because it makes $1 billion, and it's, and as long as that's true, they can get on stage and talk about how much they love their fans and love their community. They don't love them more than that $1 billion. Like that And it makes sense if you're a publicly traded company, if you're a corporation that has shareholders. I think to some degree, legally, you're obligated to make as much money as possible. So it makes sense. This is what they're designed to do. They're only doing exactly what the scorpion and the frog scenario. We knew that they're a scorpion.
Right. Well, you know, reading over this other article, I was just a few of the titles and things that were as far as people who were let go. You've got game designer Dan Dillon. That's
who I was trying to think of earlier. Dan Dillon.
So like he was D&D 5e, like one of their major game designers. He's gone. Another guy, Eaton Bernstein, who contributed to several major physical books.
We didn't even mention that on top of all this, there's a new Dungeons and Dragons coming out next year.
That's what they were saying. They were like several of the people that wrote catalogs for those. This Bernstein guy, including the upcoming Quest from the Infinite Starcase and Vecna Eve of Evil. He was the editor for those. You've got D&D Digital, the director for D&D Digital. She lost her job, and D&D Beyond producer and host.
The director for D&D Digital. They just spent. Oh my God. It's like all right. I'm going to get the number wrong, but it's over $100 million. I think it's like $160 million. They just purchased D&D Beyond, like, a few years ago. And they just made this huge investment. That's what all of the drama at the beginning of this year was based on, the idea that they were going so hard in the digital that they need to change their open game license. And the director of digital was one of the people they let go.
Right, and then it says Strange Loss is Megan Galbraith Donahue, who directed Magic the Gathering's Universes Beyond. So that she was the head of the creative production team for The Lord of the Rings and for Doctor Who and for the upcoming Fallout, Final Fantasy, and Marvel Cinematic crossovers.
Oh my God! Are you kidding me? All right, hold on, back up. What did you just say? Are they doing Magic the Gathering, Final Fantasy? What all was that?
It says she was in charge of Universes Beyond, which includes the Lord of the Rings premiere set.
I like the Lord of the Rings thing.
And then
I thought it was a good fit.
Who.
Doctor Who was awful. Why did they ever do that?
And then it says the upcoming Fallout, Final Fantasy VII, and Marvel Cinematic Universe crossover.
Marvel? What? Disney has a card game.
I know, right?
That's dead. Oh my God.
Director of game design, Mike Mearls. Also, he was the co-leader of the team that created D&D 5e. Let go.
Other than the fact that every player has dark vision, I like D&D 5e, but it's just, man, Hasbro is. I just don't want to support. Here's the weird thing: it needs to be a separate company. WOTC needs to get purchased by somebody else. I want to support Dungeons and Dragons. I don't want to support Hasbro. I don't want to give Hasbro another dime other than when I buy Play-Doh for my kid. But I don't want D&D to suffer because of it. I'm a subscriber to D&D Beyond.
Yeah,
like it's. I don't know. Well, I'm so torn by this situation, but
so every time you get paid, go to like Fidelity app and buy a little bit of Hasbro stock until eventually you buy the majority, and then you.
Oh my God! Okay, yeah.
It might take a while.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what to say about the situation other than it sucks, and these are real people. Yeah. That lost their job, and this is a real guy that took $9.5 million in compensation for the same year that he did that to 2,000 people. Yes. And that's just gross. I don't know what else to say other than it's just gross. And I'm sorry to all those people. And it really makes me appreciate publishers that are on a smaller scale, like Pathfinder. And there's a ton of others. Pathfinder's the direct, like that's the direct competitor. They weren't always competitors. There was a time period where they weren't competitors. But now they absolutely are. I mean, and I don't know. I want to finish our Icewind Dale game, and then we need to convert our Dungeons of the Mad Mage to Pathfinder or something.
Pathfinder. Well, one thing that, talking about protecting their publishers and their creative talent and things like that, which WOTC did do, is they said that they were never going to allow AI or ChatGPT to do any of their, it's all going to be human.
So the next, so the next news item we had was about WOTC and AI. And do you know why? Do you know why they made that statement, by the way? Because you sent me the statement, but I don't know if you heard about the public drama surrounding it. It's been a great year for Hasbro. Has had a great year.
No, I did not hear anything.
So I have one article here that's the most recent case, and in this particular case, so chronologically, they released some books. The art was provided for those books more than 2 years ago, and fans discovered that there was AI generated art in the books, and arguably WOTC was not at fault. Arguably, you could say they are at fault because they didn't do due diligence. I mean, people spotted it, and whenever I saw it, I could tell it's most likely AI generated. But it was presented to WOTC as if the artist had created it, not AI generated. And I think it might be the case that maybe the artist used AI to generate an image, and then he manipulated on top of it, painted on top of it. Right. I don't even know if that's the case. For all I know, he just submitted AI. I don't know. But it got into published printed books, and then WOTC released a statement apologizing for it, and they have since corrected the digital copies of the books, and any future printed books won't have that there. But then most recently, at PAX, there was a fantastic piece of artwork representing the new 2024 core rulebook that fans speculated was AI art, and that I actually don't know any specifics about why they said, like, the way the character's face is, the way its hand is. Usually with AI art, you look at the hands, they usually get those crazy. And it turns out the artist claims, and I believe him, that it's not AI. He painted this whole thing. He says that it's comparable to his other works of art, and that WOTC gave him plenty of time to do this as perfect as he could, and WOTC is also backing him up that they believe that it is his legitimate artwork. So I think this one, it turns out to be a false claim. And it really is a beautiful piece.
Yeah, I was looking at some of those. Yeah, definitely.
But with that, D&D Beyond released a statement basically saying that they are not going to allow AI. It's a really short statement, so I'll just read it real quick. It says, for 50 years, D&D has been built on the innovation, ingenuity, and hard work of talented people who sculpt a beautiful, creative game. That isn't changing. Our internal guidelines remain the same with regards to artificial intelligence tools. We require artists, writers, and creatives contributing to the D&D TTRPG to refrain from using AI generative tools to create final D&D products. We work with some of the most talented artists and creatives in the world, and we believe those people are what makes D&D great. And I will say that too. That's one thing that was one conclusion I made whenever the OGL issue was going on, and I was like comparing D&D to like a product like Pathfinder. And it is true, hands down, WOTC in Magic the Gathering and in Dungeons and Dragons has the best artwork. They work with the best artists.
It's crazy.
There's some great art in other games, but they have such. They probably fired the guy that's in charge of the eye for that, but they used to do a really good job. So we'll see if that continues. But so they released that statement. So I thought this would be an interesting topic for the show, though, because what is your opinion on using AI in art? in artwork, in writing, in like what is your opinion of AI in the workplace, as it were?
Well, I mean, like, so there's two things. One, I've seen some very creative and very well done AI artwork, and it's like some of it's amazing to look at. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like, so if for me it would be different. Like if you produce a work of art and it's AI and AI only, and say, hey, this is AI artwork, that's one thing.
Yeah.
And then you have an artist that fully does it himself and does it or herself, either way, and says, this is completely from me. The weird things I have is kind of where you mix the two, because at that point you don't know how much control the artist or the AI had over.
Yeah.
Like, because like I could say, oh, I've made this, and it could be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, and I simply like clicked a few things. Maybe I made it, but not really. Or on the other extreme, like you made this grand thing, and then you use AI to kind of like help fill in like something, or like just to make it a little bit better. Like you kind of got the each end of that. So like it kind of, for me, like when I see somebody that's drawn something and I know that they hand drew it, that blows me away. Like
oh yeah.
Like, and when I see a picture from AI, I'm like, man, that's really cool, but it doesn't, like, I don't get that same reaction, I guess.
It would
like,
it would be hard to like become a fan of like a particular AI. Like man,
right.
All the art that comes out of that, like I'm such a huge fan,
Right.
All my desktop wallpapers are 4.7 versus 3.5.
Yeah, I mean, like, so I mean, I get it. Like, I saw this video the other day that was it was a female singer, and it was, she wanted to sing her new song or whatever, and so like she sings it, and it was all AI, like her, like the likeness.
Oh yeah, I heard about this.
The AI wrote the song and did everything. It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
But it was like,
there's a
it was
song
still weird. Like,
there's a song called "The Savages" that has AI. Jay-Z didn't really do any lines in the song, but the original creator of the song used AI to make Jay-Z rap like extra verses, like he did samples in the song. And legitly, I listen to that song all the time. It's on my regular playlist. It's such a good song. I think there's a version of the song without Jay-Z. But the version of the song that got that artist all the attention was because he put AI Jay-Z in the song.
right.
And I don't know, I'm on the fence about the AI thing, because so I work my day job, I'm a software engineer, and I personally have not yet used AI for software engineering, but I follow various software engineers on YouTube, and I've started seeing them use ChatGPT to help clean up code, or to help, get some sort of breakthrough in a section. And I don't see an issue with that, but I think of software engineering as a creative endeavor. I think the fact that I'm a creative person, I like doing art and stuff like that, I think that has made me a better software engineer than a non-creative person. And so in my mind, they are using AI for a creative product. But I don't have a problem with that the way I would having a problem if WOTC started releasing all their books with 100% AI art. That would feel so, because I just know how many artists now are out of a job. Like there's even if you say, well, they still have an art director, they still have to have artists that, give the vision to the AI, because you can't just tell AI to design a Dungeons and Dragons book. Someone has to say, okay, for this page, we need a dragon coming out of a dark layer, and then it generates something, and then they type in something else to iterate on it, and they constantly change it until it finally comes out to be this other thing. I think that is probably a skill set all of its own. But I think what makes it bad is that the fear of that skill set getting rid of the other. I don't want to stop seeing real art because there's all these AI art engineers out there,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree because,
And,
like,
and
you can. So, me personally, I am not artistic as far as drawing or anything like that. So, like, I can sit down. I could probably sit down and practice and learn and do schooling for art, and I may get a little bit better. But art is one of those things to me. Like, if you can draw, that's almost something like you're born with. Like, you can't. You can learn how to do things, but someone that can do like a pencil drawing,
yeah,
like portrait, good.
Yeah.
That's not something that you can learn in a class. That's you can learn about it, but you have to have that talent too.
I hear what you're saying, and I always thought that growing up, people always told me that, and so I thought, so I believe that. But I think as an adult, the more I've watched artists on YouTube, and so many of them say that they couldn't draw and they just did it every day until they could, or following classes or tutorials. I do think that anyone could learn to draw as well as they wanted to, but it would take some people a whole lot more
Yes.
Discipline than other people. Whereas like my son, I remember being a kid and realizing that I drew better than other kids. And I know that I was like in like the second grade or so. My son is 6 years old and I think he draws better than second grade me. You know what I mean? Like he's
right.
Like, I can see that he just naturally has it, but I say naturally has it. He's always been around me. And even whenever he was small enough that he couldn't walk on his own, I gave him paintbrushes with watercolor. You know what I mean? So like there is an element of like, sure, he has a natural talent, but he's also always had,
right.
He's always been surrounded by it.
That definitely affects it. But my more thing to the opposite is with doing it, the AI, like it's becoming, shoot, 2 years ago, you didn't even talk about
yeah,
AI art. I mean, you did maybe, but it was like a new thing. So it's still very early in its infancy or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's getting more and more user friendly to do. And in probably not even the near future, you'll probably be able to go to community college and take a class
on how
to do this.
Yeah.
And anybody will be able to create this artwork.
I don't know
by simply taking.
I don't know that they'll ever. I think it will be a skill set no matter what, because you have to interpret.
I think it will.
Because you have to interpret to the AI. And it sounds like I'm defending it. I'm not, but I still think, I just think it's a different thing. And I think that as we go further and further in the future, we'll learn more and more about how to accept it in reality, and how, when it should be used and when it shouldn't be used. Like if there was an artist that I followed that used AI to generate backgrounds and they knew how to incorporate that and use it in their artwork, I would still respect that. But it's just like you said at the beginning, they can't pass it off as if it's not that. You know what I mean?
Right.
This reminds me of people that are like, there's comic book artists that are famous for tracing figures. And there's even Star Wars, Star Wars movie posters that we all know and love that are like the painted posters and they're all overlaid and all that stuff. That artist, or there's probably, I don't want to say it so definitely, because there's probably more than one artist that did that. And I don't know that they all did this, but one of those famous artists would trace the actors' faces. But I'll guarantee you, David, if my mom traced the actor's face and then tried to make that painting, she could not do it.
Oh yeah.
Just the fact that he traced that does not diminish the talent and the ability to do that in any way, just like Greg, I think it's Greg Land. There's artists out there in the comic world that, sure, we can see that he traced a Sports Illustrated magazine, but I still would guarantee, again, my mom could not have come out with the same outcome that he did. Does that make him less of an artist than a Todd McFarlane or somebody that puts so much motion and puts so much, like, if you look at Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man, if you compared it to the anatomy of a real person, it doesn't really match up. But it fit, but it is,
Right.
but it is Spider-Man, damn it. You know what I mean? Like it is so perfect. So I just think there's a place for both. And I think AI art is going to fit into the same category where it's not going to have the same respect. I mean, admittedly, it's not going to have the same respect, but I think that there will come a time where, you know, if D&D needs an image of a compass and there's nothing else in the image and they just ask AI to spit out a compass, we'll all be okay with that.
Exactly.
I think that day could come. I don't know. And I got a confession. I'm going to confess right here, right now. My D&D campaigns have a lot of ChatGPT in them. And I constantly, once I realized that I could use that as a DM, I started using it all the time. There's items that you guys have in our game, in our Icewind Dale game, that is not in. It's a real item in D&D, but I didn't know it existed. And so I asked ChatGPT, "Hey, is there an item in D&D that can do this?" And then it
finds it.
It found one, and I said, "Oh, but I need it to fit into the Icewind Dale setting. So could it be made of this?" And then it said, "Oh yeah, certainly." And then I said, "Well, what's going to keep my players from just carrying this for the rest of the game? It has to have some kind of limit." And so then it started giving me, "Well, you could offer this to your players, or your." So I use that all the time. And the opening. My opening paragraph that I read to you guys at when we did Dungeon of the Mad Mage. What I did was I told ChatGPT, I'm doing Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Here's my players. Here's some of the players have secrets. I said, here's their secrets. Help me come up with a story that's set in the Dungeons and Dragons universe and the Forgotten Realms, and make it make sense for these characters. And it came up with several different options. And then I just sort of minced together the pieces that I wanted. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I use ChatGPT for that sort of thing all the time, but I couldn't imagine using it for artwork. I think that it would get. I think there's probably a talented artist out there that could use AI to generate certain parts of their art, and they're completely upfront about it, and they're able to work it into their artwork, and it seemed natural. I think that's an okay thing. But just generating art and then trying to pass it off to WOTC as if it is, it was Frost Giants. Oh, that's funny. Icewind Dale Frost Giants. It was Frost Giant artwork that they tried to pass off as that's 100% authentic. Yeah. So I don't know, AI art one day in a distant future, in a grim, distant future where I'm trying to work this into Empire of Silence now, where humanity has left Earth because Earth is out of resources, and it's like this mythical, place.
AI took over.
Yeah, maybe that's what happens to the resources. So yeah, let's do our check-in for Empire of Silence. I don't have the book to show my bookmark check, but
the Sun Eater.
I think we're both like in the 30s. Are you past 40? You were like on 40 last time I talked, right?
I'm on 39, I think, right now. So I'm right at 40.
I'm at like 36 or so, but I've read past where you are. So we can talk about anything you've read, I have read, because I read this book back when we were doing one of the other Dark Tower series books, and I was listening to it at night to fall asleep, and I knew that we were going to do it in the future, and I got so far into it that I was like halfway through the book, and I was like, I got to stop, or otherwise I'm going to have to read the whole book again. And it kind of hit like a lull for me where I quit reading it, and I was kind of like, man, this is I don't know if I like this book or not. Like it's getting good reviews on YouTube, and I feel like I'm missing something here. It's got to be better than I think it is, but I'm kind of in this, and you and I are in it now. There's this middle section of the book where I'm just like, I feel like we're just going, like every chapter, so much time has passed, and Hadrian's like in a new place, and like it just keeps changing. And I want to go back to that opening story. I want to know more about what happens there. Right. So that's why I quit reading it the first time. And I'm glad we went back and reread it, because I loved the opening so much more on the second read than I did the first time. There's so many calls to events later on in the book, in the beginning of the book, that I didn't catch on first read. That I appreciate it a whole lot more now. That I did that I read it halfway through and then gave up and started over again. But Empire of Silence, if you haven't read the book, we're going to talk about spoilers for the first, I'd say the first more than a quarter of the book, but not quite a half. First third of the book.
Third, maybe, yeah.
So the setting, it's a sci-fi, and I would say it's probably considered high sci-fi because of the concepts that are in the book, but you can almost picture a fantasy, because it's not like every chapter or every page has like some, elaborate hologram and speaking over. It's like, it's very fantasy like, but it does deal with like cryo sleep and colonizing other planets and
space travel and all kinds of stuff.
So what I wanted, I wish that we had done an episode before you got to chapter 20, because the first 20 chapters is all the story of the Marlows, House Marlow.
House Marlow.
Our main character is Hadrian Marlow, who is the son of like a great emperor-like figure, Lord Alistair Marlow. His younger brother, Crispin Marlow, is the assumption at the beginning of the book is that Hadrian is going to be the heir to the throne of this empire someday. And him and his brother are sort of being trained as if they are one day going to be, part of this ruling class. And it's in the first chapter, it's revealed, and even in the prologue, I think, even on the description on the back of the book, it's revealed that the story is being told from the perspective of sort of Hadrian's memoirs in some way. It's Hadrian recounting his life. And in this recounting, we're going to hear why the world, the system at large, knows Hadrian as the Sun Eater, the destroyer of this sun that like genocides like an entire race of the Cielsen. And this book, so that's the ending of the book, basically revealed there. And
right at the beginning.
Yeah, right at the beginning, literally the back cover of the book. And it's going to be why and how and what leads up to this is what all the compelling part of the story is. But in the first part of the book, we learn that Hadrian, born of this Alistair and Liliana Marlow, in a vat. Alistair and Liliana basically don't even have like a relationship together.
Right. Yeah.
It's like completely like they just chemically put their fluids together and made Hadrian. And Hadrian is like this like pristine, genetically modified human that they are going to live for like 1,000 years. He's not susceptible to any disease. Like he is just like this perfect like human form. His skin is pale, and there's what I found interesting about that whole concept is there's parts of the book where he's like in the city with the plebeians, and he's like he sees people that are like his age, but they look so old, right? And he's like this elderly woman who's probably younger than I am, but because she's not wealthy enough to have this genetic mutation, she's forced to live like a normal human, and therefore she's like this old lady. Go ahead.
One of the things I found interesting too is you had the group, and I forgot what they're called, like Peloton, not Peloton, that's the bike. Whatever they are, it starts with a P. So like they are like this class that's like at the top. Yeah. And so like they're genetically
Palatine,
something
like that. I know what you're talking about.
But they are like, so like they're genetically created before birth, like, and they're made. And then you have this other group that's below them that are, I don't know that there's really any normal born, but they're not genetically altered. But later in life, as they grow and they do things and they accomplish things, they're allowed to be genetically
yeah,
altered as they grow to like, so like the head of their guard was like, he can live a little bit longer now, and he's a little bit better at this because he gained that status to be able to
and there was
to get that stuff.
And it's a show of status, like having a Louis Vuitton purse. Like it's like a show of status, because there was the debutantes or whatever. I can't remember what they were called, but there was the people that came in like chapter 3 or 4 to talk to Alistair, and Hadrian was not invited. And he kind of like puts himself in the conversation because he was kind of offended that he wasn't invited. And there was the lady with like the gold or silver teeth. Yes. And Hadrian's like, why would she? They have white. Like, why would you choose that color? But it's the status thing. She wants people to see that she has those genetically modified. Yeah. Yeah. I forgot about that. So the dynamic, I would say, especially in this first part of the book, but even later on, because his shadow is cast, through all of this story that we've read so far. Sort of the villain of the book, the bad guy of the book, is Alistair Marlowe. Like, the father is such a menacing figure. Those first chapters, those first 19 chapters, rereading those was like amazing to me. I don't know where it's going from here, and I imagine that it's gonna kick off into something completely unexpected. But that first part of the book, if the whole book was that, I would love it. I loved the dynamic of like the games of castles, between between Crispin and Hadrian and Alistair. Every scene Alistair is in, I could just picture if this was like a Stanley Kubrick film where like every scene Alistair is in, he's always in some chair or some throne higher than everyone else in the room. Yeah. It's always like the most menacing thing, the most menacing piece of architecture. It just the whole book gives like that sort of Stanley Kubrick vibe. The guards, like the royal guards, and that follow Hadrian and Crispin around everywhere they go. They wear these. It's almost like the red guards on Star Wars. Like they wear these like suits with no faces. It's just completely smooth. And then
they see like a digital projection inside of what's happening.
Yeah, I love the imagery in the book, and reading it a second time, I really appreciated it. But Hadrian's probably his closest relationship is with his tutor, Tor Gibson, who is a scholiast, which there's the chantry and there's the scholiast. There's sort of two factions of, one is like the scholiast are kind of like
Vulcans.
Vulcans. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to think of. They're like Vulcans, where they have learned to like master
logic
emotions. Yeah,
no emotion. Everything is.
They're really just like the
black
Vulcans.
and white. Yes.
Like there's all these like rumors that they go through these like crazy treatments to take their emotions out of them and all this stuff. But in reality, they have emotions. They just spend their lives like learning to master them, which is the same as the Vulcans. People make the mistake of believing that it's some trait to their race, but it's not. They train and they learn to do that.
Well, emotions get in the way of reason and logic. So like you got to get rid of those things. And there's certain
fear
instances
is
where,
a poison. Yeah.
Right. Like Hadrian will like when he realizes that, one, he's not going to be the heir.
Yeah.
And then two, that not only is he not going to be the heir, but he's going to be banished to the Cielson. Gibson actually has
he's banished to the Chantry.
The Chantry, yes.
Yeah. I was like, damn, they're feeding him to the Cielson.
I know, right? Like he shows emotion. He's sad that that's going to happen, and like you see, like Hadrian notices, like he said, oh, he didn't take the look off of his face like in time and things like that. So like, which is crazy too. Not only like do they not show emotion, but the whole civilization in general, like everything that they do or say or whatever is being recorded.
Oh yeah. Like, there's cameras.
So like there's cameras literally everywhere. And so like not only can they not show emotion, but then you have to be very careful when he does show some emotion or even let, something out of the ordinary happen, like he can get in a lot of trouble for that. And
it reminds
go ahead.
It reminds me of like to the plebeians, Hadrian is this, he gets beat up in the scene by the guys with they burn their nose whenever they commit some kind of crime, and they tattoo the crime on their head.
Tattoo the crime.
They make comments about like how privileged he is and how like, what's he doing down here, and all this kind of stuff. And from their perspective, Hadrian has this life that is like just above, just, like anybody would trade places with Hadrian easily. And the truth is, Hadrian is so alone. He's so disconnected from his parents. He can't have any friends other than his brother, who he can't stand.
Yeah.
And like he is probably the loneliest, most restricted person. Like you said, facial expression, everything he has to calculate and think about how he was taught to do it. In the conversations between Hadrian and the miner, the lady that was like in charge of the miners on some distant planet, and she's trying to get Hadrian to fund repairs and stuff because she's losing workers in these mines. That whole conversation where he's talking about how he shouldn't have bent down and picked up her pen when she dropped it. And he shouldn't have smiled at something she said. Like, he has to think about every action he takes because he's been trained since he was a child to, and technically, based on the age of his life, he's an infant. Like, he's still a child. So yeah, he is like, it's funny. It reminds me of, and I hate to connect this back to real world, but it reminds me of recently there was an interview with Elon Musk, and there's a part, and people laugh at the interview because there's some really funny parts of it, but there's this one part where it seems like Elon is really being real for a moment. He talks about how lonely he is and like how no one can connect to him. And it is true. He has to be the loneliest person. Like, who can relate to this guy? Who can connect to this guy that doesn't have some other, ulterior motive? Like that to me, that's what Hadrian is. Like, Hadrian is like locked away in this castle. Like, there's no way to relate to him, to connect to him. He's not allowed to make connections. And we find that later on in the story, which I don't want to jump, there's still more about this part I want to talk about, but later on in the story, whenever he's like on the streets and like trying to survive with Cat, or in the Colosso trying to survive as a gladiator, in some ways he's happier there and actually makes real connections with real people for the first time ever in his life. And in the words of his,
to the point where like, even when they're friendly to him, he's like, he doesn't get it. Like, why? Like, I don't.
What are they gaining from being friends with me? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I'll say one thing about Hadrian, and I'll really like his character because, and what to me sets this first part of this book off from, any other book of where you have like what's supposed to be a great hero and all this stuff, is he's not likable a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff where you're like, man, this guy's an ass, or like, he's a jerk, or like, and he also,
it's that aristocratic
doesn't, well, he doesn't always come out on top, which is another really interesting thing about him. Because usually in these epic hero quest things, they, regardless of the thing, they'll somehow overcome something. And that, like, early on, like when he's walking and he gets jumped by the guys, like I kept thinking, okay, like, here comes the hero thing. He's gonna like do something. He's gonna wind up beating these guys up, and then it's totally opposite. He winds up getting beat up and kind of put in a coma type thing. And there's certain situations that happen, like, he offends Cat early on. He, he's really not
whenever
nice.
So one thing is too, is like, he will recognize something is wrong, but he doesn't have that like Peter Parker mentality where it's like, okay, I've seen a wrong in the world, so I must right it. You know what I mean? Right, I'm the hero, so I must right it. And so like, whenever he first he recognizes that the Umand are being mistreated on the main planet they go to. It's not like he all of a sudden says, I'm going to start working on a way to try to free these like creatures. Like, he's just like, yeah, the world's messed up.
He's definitely a very flawed character. Like, and you know, at the beginning, you get this kind of going along what we were saying earlier with his mother and father aren't really like, they don't have a relationship. So like the mom is always at her home and dad's always doing his thing. And so like he looks down on both of them, and he even there's a good part about how like he doesn't even think his mom even knows he exists, kind of thing. Like she just totally ignores him. And then it turns out she's been working behind the scenes and doing all this stuff to get him off of this world, and he never realized it. And you know, like you can see his character as like kind of being self-centered in that kind of area as far as where his mom is, and he's always looking at the negative things. I don't know, it feels like he doesn't even try to learn or get to know. He has these preconceived notions that this is how his family are. I also think he's nervous with the cameras and all that stuff. You also have to be very careful.
I think that's more present with Crispin than with his mom. So with Crispin seems like he's trying to be a good brother. It's just what Crispin wants out of life and wants out of the world is just like completely different than Hadrian. Like Hadrian sees the Chantry as these propagandist, like warmongering, power-seeking torturers, like, you know, and he wants to have no part in it. And
well, you know, they talk about crusades.
Yeah,
So the image I got from the Chantry was that they are basically the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah.
They're going around. They're looking for anything and their religion is definitely different.
Yeah.
It's not like we would think God, but like
they worship the fabled Earth. So like they believe that the Earth, like I can't remember exactly how it's worded
or something.
Yeah, and it gave up its resources like as a sacrifice so that the humans would would reach out into the stars and cultivate other places. Like they had this whole religious symbolism around basically a planet dying because humans abused all the resources. And I thought that whole concept was extremely interesting. And and you can't help but to compare it to this book is written, and I've watched interviews with the author, and this book is written in such a way that there's so many things that like harken back to real historical figures. Like, I mean, obviously Hadrian reads like Caesar. Like I feel like his personality, especially in the beginning of the book, is like the way he talks about himself and talks like it sounds like Caesar. Caesar.
But they even have a discussion about Caesar.
Yeah. You caught that there was a Karate Kid reference in one part. Yeah, I wouldn't have caught that. But there is in the Gladiator part. There's a part where he says "blood and thunder," and I was thinking, is so when I hear "blood and thunder," I think of World of Warcraft. But I bet that's also just a phrase that's used like in a bunch of stuff, and maybe World of Warcraft is referencing something more historic that I would be more cultured if I knew, but I know it from WoW. I don't know, but the orcs say blood and thunder, so I don't know if it's harkening back to that on purpose or not.
So there's a thing that I've always noticed in a lot of sci-fi, especially that is Earth-based and takes place way in the future. So like examples are like Star Trek: The Next Generation, or like the Fifth Element movie. This book, obviously, like, and other things where, so like my biggest example is, I'm sure you've seen Fifth Element.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the scene where toward the end, she's watching all this video footage of war and destruction and all this, and kind of like processing if humanity is worth saving.
Yeah.
And then also go to like with Star Trek when they go to the holodeck, or they talk about things in the past, or this where they talk about Caesar and Shakespeare and things like that.
Yeah.
It's always all these things are always from our familiar Earth.
Oh yeah.
And so, like, I'm waiting. I want
Star
made
Trek.
up history to come in, like, because Star Trek does it.
Star Trek does it. Yeah, Star Trek does it where they in the Next Generation, that first episode, you're right. They and it's a trial. Q is like putting Picard on trial if humans are worth saving. Yeah,
right.
And most of the references are from, like, obviously from
way
prior,
a long time ago.
But then but they do throw in a few references to, like, there's like, humans are like doing this like whole drug thing to be these like super soldiers and all that.
Right.
But then also I think about like Cisco in Deep Space Nine. He goes back in time to a historical moment, and it's one that's still in the future from us. So Star Trek addresses it. But I know what you mean, though. It's sci-fi. It's always like whenever they reference like important moments in history, it's like, oh, it all took place before 2019. You know what I mean?
Right. That's like you're watching The Fifth Element. You're like, okay, she's looking at like war and destruction from
there should be like
most likely have been 1,000 years. Humans would have changed so much in that time frame. Like, where's the war that happened right up before? But anyway, I get this a lot in this book too, like, because there's a lot of references to the past.
But there's also a lot of references. So one thing about the way this book is written is it's written as if you are a member of this war, of this world.
Yeah.
So the book is written from the perspective of Hadrian Marlowe. So he references things. And he references it in such a way that you're expected to know what he's referring to, but yet you don't know what he's referring to. Like,
well, it took me a while to get going at the beginning of the book because I had to like
he talks
figure
about
a lot of things out.
Like he says something like, I can't remember the exact wording, but there's a quote where he says something like, "And you laugh, but I fashioned myself after Simeon the Red," or like he says, like, you laugh like you're going to be in on the joke, but as the reader, we're not in on the joke.
I have no, who the hell is Simeon the Red? Like,
but that's that. So Simeon the Red is cool too, because it's like it's mentioned as this historical figure at the beginning of the book, and you slowly learn more and more about who that person was. And there's another one too. There's two figures that he mentions a lot in this book. And over time, you learn more and more about. Like, he tells Kat the story of Simeon the Red. Maybe he tells Kat the story of one of them.
Yes.
And then he tells the story, like, but when they're originally mentioned, it's as if you're supposed to know who they are, because you obviously, if you found his memoir in the library of whatever, you obviously know who Simeon the Red is.
So this, and you sent that video, but even before I watched that video, I got from just the opening couple chapters was Dune. Like, to me, like, there's a lot of Dune in this. And especially with the family and the houses. It
makes me want to read Dune, because
Dune is so good. Now, I will say that this isn't as complex as far as Dune, like that setup.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more, like, and in Dune, Frank Herbert does the same thing. He just assumes you know all this stuff from something he made up. And like, so that's why it took me like what these different classes and the Cielson and all these different things, and like,
I'm so intrigued by the Cielson.
Right.
I've read further. Yeah, I've read further than you, so I know that there's something coming up, but I want to know more about. I feel like it's going to be later books before we really know. It's going to be kind of like the way gosh, we haven't read a Sanderson book in so long I forget, but the way in The Way of Kings, they basically don't show like hardly any perspective from the singers. What do they call them? What do the humans call the singer? I can't remember what they call them. We gotta go.
Correct.
By the time the fifth book comes out, we're not gonna remember anything that happened in the first four. But yeah, I think it's gonna be like that, where we're not really gonna learn until the next book or something.
Right.
But I'm so intrigued by the Cielson, because they just keep coming up as this like menacing enemy, but they're so far away that it would take them like many years to even get to where Hadrian is, and so
they don't have a planet. and they just float through space. Like,
yeah, and they eat each other, and they
eat
just,
each other and people.
yeah.
So basically, they're like, I don't know. I guess like if you were thinking of in terms of like Independence Day, the movie, they're like that. They go to a planet and they decimate the planets for its, you know, whatever it has, you know, natural resources and everything else, and then they take the people and eat them. At least that's what is portrayed now. Whether or not that's true, or not, I guess we'll find out.
One of the books I've these books are so hard to find that I buy them when I see them. And one of the books I have has a Cielson on the cover, so I kind of know what they look like, and it does remind me a lot of Sanderson's the Singers.
Right.
And so I think there's going to be way more to them once we finally get introduced.
And, you know, they've, you know, it's one of those things where I feel like you're building up this group to be like this, you know, just terrible, like evil, like everything. And then there's obviously
Hadrian is so intrigued by him.
Yes.
Hadrian is so intrigued by him, but he has also not like Hadrian's intrigued by him because he thinks that they're complex and interesting. He's not necessarily saying, "Oh, I think you guys are all wrong about them." You know what I mean? He's just like, yeah, they're not like, you know, there's motivation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But he's not saying they're not monsters either, you know? So it's interesting. I wonder where that's going, but so let me ask you about chapter 19. So chapter 19 is whenever, oh God, there's another thing I want to talk about too. The relationship, before we get to chapter 19, the relationship between Hadrian and the pilot lady. Oh God, I can't remember her name. That relationship is, you know, it's only in those first chapters, but I was rooting for them so much. Like, but then whenever Hadrian has the moment where he tries to express his feelings to her and kisses her, and then realizes like, oh, this can never be because of my place, my status, and hers, that it can never be. Even if she agrees to it, I'll never know if it was because of the power I hold over her, or if she truly has feelings for me. Or will she, you know, she could never say no to me. So how can I ever trust her? Yes. You know, like that dynamic.
Yeah. That was really cool.
So heartbreaking of a dynamic.
When he kisses her and then like he registers like her face and everything, and then she's like, oh, if you want to go into the room, you know, she's basically like, I'll give myself up to you.
Yeah.
And then that's when he's like, she just thinks I want sex, and she's willing to do whatever. Like, this has nothing to do with how she thinks of me.
And because of Hadrian's status, she would be willing to like wife Hadrian. You know what I mean? Like, like she is so committed to being a servant to him that if he had said, you know, I want to get married, I'm maybe I don't know if she'd leave the planet with him. I imagine she probably would, but you know, she would marry him and be his wife forever. But Hadrian knows that like I can never trust that she really feels that way. And that's that again, it goes back to that example of like Hadrian is like the loneliest person on this planet. Even more so than Crispin. Crispin and Hadrian are like in the same scenario, but like Crispin is just like along for the ride. Like he's just down for whatever. It reminds me of me and my stepbrother. My stepbrother was a lot like Crispin, and I was a lot more like Hadrian.
Well, you know, it's crazy. I get from Crispin that you don't get a lot from that is what his father really thinks about him.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously he wants him as his heir, but it's more because like they're looking at the cruelty.
Yeah.
And his.
Yeah. Crispin's willing to go along with it.
To go along with anything. And that's more important than.
Alistair's a smart guy. I think he's smart enough to know that if Hadrian were in charge, he would not. And maybe it's, I don't know what this world, I don't know what this universe is like. I don't know what situation they're in. This could be like a Warhammer's type situation where like it's like extremely grim. And maybe truthfully, Hadrian does not have what it takes to survive, like keep the human race surviving in this universe with what's at stake. And so maybe Alistair is right in that, like, Crispin is a more is a better heir to this throne. But he's
Right.
smart enough to know, whether it's for good reason or not, he's smart enough to know that Hadrian would not rule in the same way that he does. And
Well, the thing with that is when we were talking about earlier with the lady and wanting the new equipment for mining,
yeah,
is Hadrian looked at that and said, "Oh, we can increase production, we
Yeah.
can save people's lives, and all the positives that would come out in investing in this."
yeah.
And it's completely wrong from what
What?
the father wants.
Yeah.
Because he sees it as that's not their place.
Mhm.
It wasn't her place to even talk to you anyway. If that costs money, why should we care if a few of these people die?
Yeah. He says something
getting
like,
this done.
they'll start to believe that they deserve it, or something like
Right.
that. He has some quote like that, which I mean, damn, we were just talking about the situation at Hasbro.
Well, they're yeah, exactly. They're cattle. Like
Yeah.
all those people are donkeys, cattle, any kind of work animal, a horse. That's what they see them as. They're not in anywhere near their level of
Yeah.
human would be. And so like it's kind of, in going back to the Star Wars reference, like the Emperor rules the Star Wars galaxy by fear and intimidation, and they make it seem pleasant where we're going to take care of you and you're going to be protected if you just do everything we say without question.
Yeah.
But as in anything, that's never going to happen because people are awful and they don't care about the small people. And kind of the same with Dune. He is with Delos is the name of their planet. He's like the ruler of Delos, Alistair, the father.
Mhm.
But then there's like an emperor that's over like all of the planets. And so like the father also wants to move, like he wants to retire or whatever and leave this planet to one of the sons. And then he would take up like a bigger position as far as across the universe. But he's worried.
He even sees his sons as pawns in this political game.
Well, that's his. He sees Hadrian as something that's going to keep him from gaining that position.
Yeah,
because of the way he looks at humanity and actually has some kind of emotion and feeling toward them. And Hadrian realizes that ever since he was born, he's been a tool and not a child. He's been, that. And, one of the weird things between him and Crispin that I also found interesting is that they're both, children are genetically altered and they're made to be, and Crispin is often referred to as, he's taller, he's better looking, he's a lot of these things better. But like, my question is, if you're able to genetically make a person, like, I don't understand. I mean, obviously they wouldn't all be identical, but like,
couldn't
it's
you?
just weird to me that Hadrian would be shorter and so much different than what
that's an
that
interesting
group of people. Like, why? Why is he so different? Like,
that is an interesting. I didn't think about that. That is an interesting. I kind of have a fan theory going on in my head right now, but
because even now, I mean, essentially, if you wanted to, you could have your baby modified to have certain eye color or something like that. So at this point in the future, you would think they'd be like, okay, he's got to be at least 6'5", and I want him with a chiseled chin and like all this stuff. And the fact that he's shorter, and it just seemed a little bit off to me. Like, and why is that? Like,
that is interesting.
So, I mean, maybe there's something to that. Who knows? But like,
that is interesting. But so back to chapter 19.
Yes.
Whenever Hadrian, he parts ways with Delos, and he gets on the ship and he meets this entire crew. Like, they introduce these characters. They seem like they're going to be, all right, now we're following these people for the rest of the story.
Right.
I really like the like pirate captain guy, and
Exactly, I liked him too.
And yeah, and
his wife.
Yeah, and I didn't really like the homunculoid thing or whatever
thing, yeah.
that Hadrian was so offended by. Although they mentioned like 3 times, at least twice, they mentioned that his grandfather was killed by one of them during the act of lovemaking. That's definitely going to be a part of like some future.
Gotta be something, yeah.
Yeah,
you can't throw that out there.
Right. I mean, they threw it. They made sure you got it because they mentioned it twice. And there's a bunch of stuff like that in the first part of the book that like where he mentions the whole gladiator thing and like the gladiators on such and such planet. And the first time I read it, I just thought, oh, this is another one of those things where if I were reading the book as a member of this society, it would make sense to me, but it doesn't. Right. Oh, isn't that neat? But then on the second read, I was like, oh, that's because he's going to be a gladiator. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I caught a bunch of that stuff on the second read. But so whenever he gets frozen into cryosleep, and what did you think? What did you think was going to happen?
Not what happened. And I was going to say, like, a lot in this book up to this point.
Yeah.
Usually when I read something or watch something, I can be like, okay, I see what's coming. And
yeah.
like,
I see how they're putting this together.
I see how they're putting it. And maybe I'm not 100% right. Or like, I guess almost everything in this book I've gotten completely wrong about what I thought was coming up.
Have you heard the study about how there's really no such, like, spoilers don't really ruin the story? Have you heard that study? So the idea is that the fact that you pick up on things on your way to the conclusion actually makes you enjoy the conclusion more, because then you feel like, oh, I see how they're doing this. I was able to follow this hunt, and then the reward at the end is the payoff that, oh, I was right about that. And so, yeah, there was a lot of setup, but then when you watch something where the twist is just so out of left field and you're like, what, where did that even come from? Then a lot of times it ruins the movie, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think that somehow those characters are important to the story. There's no way they got introduced for that like 2-chapter period where he gets put in the cryosleep and then wakes up on a completely different planet. He doesn't know how much time has passed, and he has, he's naked and and then he's by himself. It can't, what happened? Like, what happened to that crew? What happened to those people? Right. It has to be important. And then he thinks about him later on. He says, like, there's a few moments in the chapters where he's with Kat, where he's just like, I must have done something wrong. There has to be, where did the crew of the such and such guy? I can't remember the name of the ship, but and the ship has a name. Why give the ship a name if you're never going to see it again? There has to be more to that than we know.
Well, so there's certain parts, like when we were talking about the female pilot. So like, she first rejects him. Then when he's getting ready to leave the planet, she shows up. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. I was like, here it comes. Now they're going to be together.
Now she's going to go off with him. Yeah.
And then like, she's just like, yeah, see ya. And then I was like, okay, I was wrong about that. And then like with this group, like, you're like, okay, new people, and then like literally this chapter set up, and then the very next chapter they're like, like you said, he wakes up and they're all gone, and then he goes and he finds the ship, and I was like, okay, now we're gonna get answers. Yeah. And then the girl's just like, yeah, everything in it's scrapped, like the letter that Gibson wrote him. So
the letter. What was the point of the letter? Why did that even?
That's what I was like, this is awesome. I was like, he's finally gonna get the letter. She's like, yeah, we got rid of everything. I was like, what? I was like, this doesn't make any sense. This letter, he went through much stuff to get this letter and to protect this letter and to do this letter, and then it's just like, nah. I kept thinking it was going to come up, and then he's like, oh, I've been here for 3 years now, and I'm like, well, obviously the letter's really gone. Or something like.
So I keep thinking that this is a Picard learning to play the flute scenario. Like Hadrian lives out this entire life on this planet, and then he wakes up and he wakes up from cryosleep on that ship. And then book 2 is like actually this is where the story begins. And that might happen. Something like that might happen. I don't know if it did. If it did, it must be done so well that people didn't like backlash against it. Because there's like 4 more books after this. Which I put all, I know that I have coming. I put all on my Amazon Christmas list, and my mother-in-law basically just buys me whatever's on my Christmas list. And so, and you can cheat, because if you go and you try to buy it, it'll say someone might have bought you this on your Christmas list. So I know,
might have.
So I know that I'm gonna have this set here pretty soon. Except for there's like a newest one that is only released on hardcover. And I want all my books to match, so I'm going to wait for the soft, not soft, paperback to come out.
Paperback.
So yeah, man, I don't know. So what did you think? The section of the book that you're in now, where Hadrian, he's went through his experience alone on the streets and like stealing stuff, and then with Cat and even the cat thing, I felt like on the first read, I felt like that was several chapters, but it's only like 2 or 3 chapters.
Yes, and that's another person. I was like, okay, so now he's got this great like companion. They're gonna have like an adventure. And they kept talking about. I kept thinking that because like he would say something, and then he like the author would be like, she gives him a strange look, or like she's looking at him in certain ways. And I kept thinking like she's going to have some secret, like she has access to a spaceship.
Oh yeah.
Or something along those lines. And then like you go through this thing and then like jump to the next section. She's like, oh yeah, she's sick and she's dead.
Yeah, she dies. Like, the whole planet gets a plague.
Right. And I'm just like, wow.
That is a really good, like, this whole planet gets a plague, and it's like COVID-19 but like times 100, and people just are dropping dead, and this poor asshole that can't possibly get sick because of a genetic mutation just has to like live, he just has to wander around without any money. He can't. So that's another interesting thing, is that like he can't, like, he could easily get himself out of the situation, but he doesn't want them to do a blood scan, because then it'll send a message back to his dad, and they'll come get him and take his ass to the chantry. And so he is willing to like live this life because it's somehow more free than the life he was living on Delos, or even worse. I'm sure the chantry would be even worse, because he would be forced to like harm people and stuff that he doesn't want to do. But he's willing to be a gladiator.
So this part reminded me a lot of the actual movie Gladiator.
Yeah.
Where what's his name like meets all the other people that are also gladiators, and they all form a team to like Maximus, Decimus, whatever. But anyway, like that's what I got out of this, because he goes in there. And he's like this loner guy, but then like he meets people, and he all of a sudden becomes friends with them, and they fight as a team, and like he's instructing them on how to do things, and like
this was really, it felt like Kaladin with Bridge 4 kind of thing.
Yes, definitely.
He's in with the underdogs, and he's using his background to kind of train them, and not only make a name for himself, but also try to better their lives in the process. And he picks up a I guess not really like Cat, but he picks up
whatever.
Yeah, he picks up a character that he's kind of taking under his wing to make sure he survives and stuff.
Which is another character that I got wrong, because the way it was going, I was like, okay, he's going to kill him off in one of these early bouts.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to like deal with loss or something. And then like next thing you know, it's like a year later.
Yeah.
And the kid's still alive. And I was like, okay, did not see that coming. Yeah. And like, because he was, a total fish out of water as far as like, he was a gay prostitute. Was from what it sounded like.
Yeah, he was I think a child prostitute.
He
was sold by his parents. Yeah.
Yes. And so like, it was kind of one of those things where, again, one of those growing as a character where you experience like a trauma or something. So I figured like he's going to take this kid under his wing, he's going to die, and he's going to grow as a character as a result of it, and blah blah blah, or something's going to happen. And then I was like, okay, so something else happened in that year. I don't know what, but
yeah. So in my reading where I am right now on the second read, I'm right at that area. So I don't remember what happens to that character.
Yeah, he's still like, the last thing I was reading was they had gone to look at a spaceship to buy.
Yeah, I know that he's trying to get him to go with him to get the spaceship, and there's like a whole like conflict where like because
he learns that he's
a Palatine or whatever,
Palatine and apparently he's totally against it, and then Hadrian realizes like, yeah, he was sold to people just like me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of interested to see where that goes. If it's he turns on him or what. But
don't I don't want to say anything, but the book it just keeps changing. It just keeps changing.
Right.
That's like we're in the section now where like I quit reading because I was like, it just pick something and stick with it, Hadrian. Like dang it, like don't just. Pick a major, all right, Adrian? You don't have to change your major every 6 months. We want to know what kind of hero you are. Are you a gladiator or not? Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the first part more on the second read. The part we're in now, I don't know. I kind of feel the same way about it. I kind of feel like things are happening and like there's such gaps in time between each chapter and it changes so much. I really think I'm going to enjoy this. I'm in it for the long haul. I want to read all these books now, and I really think I'm going to enjoy them on the level that I enjoy the Dark Tower and the Brandon Sanderson books. And I think that's a huge praise to this author because this is his first published. What we're reading now is his first published book, and I think it's a very well written. I am really enjoying the character of Hadrian. But
yeah.
we are in a section where like I need something to happen. I need something to kick in and drive me through the rest of the story. Because right now I just feel like I'm just reading Hadrian's memoirs and it hasn't really hit the hook yet. Like I don't know where this is leading to, but I think that where I left off, I think that I was on the verge of something, and so
that's how I feel too.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I was going to ask you is, so the whole thing about childbirth.
Yeah.
And I don't really like.
Well,
he explains that part of well, all that stuff is for the ultra rich, right? And
yeah.
So the way that sounds to me like is that people still, like normal people, still do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
So then there's this character that when he's walking through the halls, and this is after he.
Oh yeah.
And he comes across that what are they called? I can't even remember. Kachari or the people that he was going to go to.
Chantry.
The Chantry. Yeah, he runs across that guy from the Chantry, and he's deformed, and he's like
a mess. He's like a genetic modification, like gone awry, like a deformation.
Right. Well, like I couldn't figure out what they were trying to say was his issue was, because it sounded like
he continues to be a character.
Well, to me, it sounded like he was saying that his parents, instead of doing it with modifying, genetically, they actually had sex.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
He was born that way because, I guess what I'm thinking is are people like Hadrian and that ilk,
like they have to do
they have to do, because is it like incest where if they actually did have sex,
they're too genetically similar,
the genetically thing would just mess everything up. And I was like, well,
I don't remember that.
What he is?
I don't remember. I don't remember that from the first read, but I'll look out for that when I reread it.
Because it kind of like he says something about it, and I was like, I didn't quite understand it, and I was like, because that's what I was kind of figuring was like,
I'll watch for it. I'll watch for it this time around. But that character comes up. it come where I left off, where I quit reading, that character had come up again. That so you're at a yet another turning point in the story. You're almost there. Yeah, I keep thinking any minute now he's going to wake up from cryosleep, and that because he kept the ring on is why he was having all these like wild dreams. Because you remember the pirate captain guy is like, it's like, I'm not trying to rob you, but like, just trust me. You don't want to go in there with that ring. And he did anyway. And then that's had no effect to the story. So
basically it was like they bandaged his finger up, and I was like, so they just needed a Band-Aid, and they were making like a big deal about this. Like, it was weird.
I just had an epiphany. Oh my gosh. All right. People that have read Empire of Silence that may be watching this are going to laugh so hard at how wrong I am. But I just had an epiphany. You know how when we read books, I always say, well, here's what I would have done. We could call it one of those. The ring carries his genetic history, his genetic lineage.
Right.
What if he's like living Alistair Marlowe's life right now? He's really in cryosleep, but he's living out Alistair's life, and it's gonna tell the whole story of becoming his father, and like leading to like Hadrian's birth, and then he wakes up from cryosleep, realizing this.
He got passed through the ring into
yeah. Oh my God.
That would be interesting.
If we read this book and that turns out to be what it is, I'm gonna lose my mind. That would be a cool ending. I would think that was pretty cool. Yeah, I have no idea, but there's so many things that are like, oh, there must be a reason for this. But there's too many to count. Like there's too many. Is it just that this author is writing things so real that it seems like everything has a purpose, but it doesn't really? Or does all of these things really have a purpose, and we just are not, the pieces haven't fallen in place yet? I'm not sure which is true. It's crazy.
I was trying to look. That guy's name is Gilliam Voss, I think.
Yeah, Gillian Voss.
But it didn't really. I was reading his thing in that.
Yeah. By the way,
character thing.
I found that was the only link to characters I could find, and it has a lot of spoilers. I didn't read.
Yeah, it does.
I didn't read anything. But I didn't like. I basically have only read the characters that I know about, and I haven't read more than a sentence or two because there's a lot of spoilers. But I can tell just by the sheer list that there's a lot more to this than we know so far.
Yeah, definitely. But I liked it. I really enjoy the book. I think it's well written. I like the fact that it keeps you on your toes, and like there is things that surprise you that don't happen or do happen.
Yeah.
It's not cut and paste like hero, follow this outline. Yeah. It's very pleasant in that way.
I really enjoyed it. I think that, but the funny thing is I didn't the first time I read it. So I think it's unusual that way. I didn't like it when I first read it. I mean, I read over half the book, so I guess I liked it more than I thought. But yeah, I really love it on the second read, and like I'm like bought in. Like I really think that unless this book ends with just like a total fall on its face, I feel like this is going to become one of my favorite series. It's really, really, really good so far. And it's just simple enough. It's not overly complex, but at the same time, there is complexity there. You know what I mean? Like, it's not convoluted, but it has some political complexity.
Right.
I like it.
I like it too.
I can't wait.
I'm interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, I can't wait to get caught up. Oh, last thing, the Umand. What do you picture in your mind whenever they talk about the Umand? I can't picture it. I literally can't put it together. I started looking up Umand like fan art. Like I can't find I can't find an illustration. I can't understand. I either think they're kind of like Daleks with like tentacles coming out of them, or they're but they're too humanoid. I was thinking maybe they're like the Draenei on World of Warcraft, where they have tentacles, coming out of parts of their body, but they're still kind of humanoid.
Right.
But he even says, like, whenever he looks at the Cielson, they are recognizable to humans. They have a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs, whereas the Umand, like they are completely unrecognizable, and they have all these tentacles. And I'm like, well, what is that? I can't picture.
Yeah, like
I don't feel like there's enough there for me to picture what they look like.
no, and I was trying to see if there was anything in this thing that described him at all.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Well, I don't see.
And I know that they come up again in the story where I've read up to, but I don't know that they're like important to the whole story. Like, are they going to
Right.
be a third faction in this story? I have no idea. But yeah, they're just
Well, like you almost think of Davy Jones from like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies with like a human that basically has a tentacle face.
That's what the Draenei look like. Yeah. They're basically Draenei. And that's kind of what I'm thinking, but that's too humanoid. That's too
right.
That's too recognizable. I don't know, man. That's weird. I feel like there is probably missing some description there.
Right.
I'm gonna go back and read that chapter or something.
It's probably. I mean, you would think it would come up again at some point. Like feel like that's one of those things that
they drop in.
They drop in, and then to kind of give you that, like, oh my god, what was that? And then they come back and talk about it. Like, there's definitely a lot of groundwork laid out in this first third of this book, and it just I'm still trying to get used to all the names and things like that. And the one good thing about this is they don't get too much into the like families, so it's not like Game of Thrones even Dune. Even Dune, they get into a lot of that, but like at least it's the family's kind of just to this one family. Hadrian's family. You're not getting all these names thrown at you, and
there's really not a lot of because I was thinking about that whenever we were preparing for the show, and I was trying to make a list of all the main characters, and it's really not a large list. But they have really good interactions with each other. We kind of glossed over his relationship with Gibson, but Gibson is the most father-like figure in his life. So much so that rereading it for the second time, I was even thinking, like, is it possible somehow that Gibson is his biological father, but because of the whole being born in the vat and all that stuff, it can't possibly be. Also, another thing we kind of glanced over that I think is going to have more importance in the future, and the book kind of glances over it too. The fact that Liliana Marlowe has like these like sleeper agents within Alistair's kingdom, which is what the one pilot lady was. So I think that's going to play a role later on in the book. And when you were talking about why is Hadrian so genetically different than Crispin, I was thinking my fan theory that I mentioned that I had. What if Liliana intentionally manipulated the DNA of Hadrian to try to, and that's why he's also kind of her chosen son, and maybe that's why Alistair has always had this like spite towards him versus Crispin, is because he kind of knows that this is the case, or is figuring it out as Hadrian gets older. So I don't know. Lots of theories around what's going to happen next. But I'm confident it's going to be good. I think this book would really, really, really have to shit the bed for me to be let down.
Right. And the one thing I've heard too is, as far as the books that are out, that this is the one that's the hardest to get into.
Really?
The next couple ones get even better and better. So
it's because of the whole section we're in now. I'm telling you, it just changes too much. It's just like you're living this guy's like entire life all at once, and that's why I think that must be somehow this is setting up for. I feel like Hadrian is living somebody else's life, or living like there's got to be some other. I don't know, but then how would he have? Would he be living through his father's life, but somehow having his thoughts and affecting his? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. It's probably not. It's totally Hadrian. He's not going to wake up in a cryo chamber. But yeah, I don't know.
You got to figure there's a lot of these characters that he's like, oh, like Gibson. Oh, I don't know what happened to Gibson. What happened? Is he alive or dead? What happened?
No, we know Gibson is coming back because
we know he's coming back, but like you don't know anything at this point. It's been however long. Same thing with his mom. You don't know what happened with he has no idea. Like, did she get captured? Did they figure anything out?
But what I'm saying is there's some clues because Hadrian, the future Hadrian that is writing this memoir knows what happened.
Yes.
And so he does drop clues. Like whenever he talks about, and in that moment, I thought Gibson died and I would never see him again. He didn't. It turns out he was exiled, but that wasn't his last day or something like that. Like he's exactly. We kind of get a glimpse because Hadrian, future Hadrian knows, you know?
Right.
But yeah, you're right.
That's what I'm saying. Like all this, is coming. So they didn't like, that's why I wonder about that Starship crew because it's kind of
why would Hadrian? Like, why would future Hadrian even write that part of his memoir?
Right, because like the way it makes like it sound is at some point somebody took over their ship, and shot them out into space or something, and then scraped the ship for money, and then I kept thinking, well, if they got him in space, why would they have brought him all the way down to the planet and then threw him in an alley? Why wouldn't they just eject him out into space too?
Yeah. And
then I feel like maybe that the crew. My first thought was that the crew did that, and then then he says, oh, these people, when he confronts them, he's like, oh, these are the people that dumped me in the alley. So I'm like, but how did the ship get to this planet? And I feel like there's too many open questions for that to be the end of it. Like that would just seem very weird.
I don't know, man. I'm still on team. I'm still on team. He's living out Alistair's life or something, because also, why does the ring even matter? Why does the ring, putting on the ring before he goes into cryo, was it just to illustrate how important the ring is to Hadrian? Well, that's already been illustrated like 100 other times. Like this is not the first time we learned about how important that is to him. That it has to be a plot point that he was wearing the ring and he shouldn't have been.
And then the fact that he makes the choice to wear the ring, and then he wakes up and the ring is gone, and then he still winds up getting the ring. He still
winds up finding it again. Yeah, yeah.
And you're just like, okay, like that's weird too. Like,
he couldn't.
Why was the? Yeah, they just handed it off and then lost it and found it later. Like, why? I don't know.
They were just short a few chapters. If it's that's the thing. If it's not important, all this stuff is going to feel like it was just fluff. But I truly don't believe it is. So
yeah, no, I feel like there's more to all of this. Definitely.
So I was going to play a video game tonight, but now I want to go read the book. I want to get caught up to where I was whenever I left off, but I don't remember all the gladiator stuff. And so I was like listening to the audiobook, and I was just like sort of letting it play. It's reminding me of things that I read the first time, but I'm just keeping up with you. And then we got to the gladiator thing, and I was like, oh, I kind of forgot some of this. So I need to maybe quit listening to the audiobook and go make sure I read it and retain it, because I don't remember what happens. Like you said, that character survived. I don't even remember what happened to that guy. So yeah, I'm going to start reading closer now because I'm getting closer to where I left off. All right. This was a cool episode. Really glad we did it.
Yeah.
And let's get together again next week.
Yeah.
And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And next week we'll come back. There'll probably be more terrible Hasbro news for us to talk about. Who knows? And we'll catch up on where we were.
Exactly. See what other craziness ensues.
All right.
Peace out, everyone.